I took in my sister and paid for her education. At graduation, she called me a tyrant to friends. I canceled her university payment. Now she's a waitress with 3 roommates. Instead of studying, after our parents' death, I took in my younger sister and paid for her education. At her graduation, she told friends I had to live with my tyrant sister who controlled my every move. That evening, I canceled her university enrollment payment. When she rushed over yelling, I calmly said, "The tyrant decided to set you free. Now you can do what you want without my control or money." She cried, "But how will I study?" "That's your problem," I said. "Freedom always has a price." 6 months later, she was working as a waitress instead of studying and renting a room with 3 roommates. Sometimes people need to experience the true cost of words, like control and freedom. The call came on a random Tuesday afternoon while I was knee-deep in spreadsheets at work. I remember staring at my iPhone screen, not comprehending the words. The hospital administrator was saying, "Car accident, critical condition, both parents. Come immediately." My whole world changed in that moment. 1 minute I'm worried about quarterly reports. The next I'm speeding down the highway in my Honda, praying to whatever higher power might be listening. But I was too late. By the time I screeched into the hospital parking lot, they were already gone, just like that. No goodbyes, no final words of wisdom. Just the cold, sterile smell of the hospital and a doctor with sympathetic eyes delivering the news that destroyed my life as I knew it. And then there was my sister, Chloe, 16 years old, sitting in the waiting room with mascara streaking, down her face looking so small in her Hollister hoodie. What do you say to someone who's just lost everything? What do you do when you're suddenly the only family they have left? "You're coming home with me," I told her that night, after we dealt with the initial paperwork nightmare that follows unexpected death. My apartment wasn't huge, just a 2-bedroom place near downtown, but it would have to do. There wasn't even a discussion about it. She was my baby sister. Of course she would live with me. The first few months were brutal, not gonna lie. We were both grieving, but in completely different ways. I threw myself into practicalities, funeral arrangements, insurance claims, closing up our parents' house, figuring out guardianship paperwork. Meanwhile, Chloe would either lock herself in her room blasting music or disappear for hours, coming home smelling like cigarettes and giving me attitude when I asked where she'd been. "You're not Mom," she'd snap, slamming doors and rolling her eyes like I was the biggest buzzkill on the planet. "No kidding," I wanted to scream back. "I'm just the 24-year-old who put her life on hold to make sure you don't end up in foster care." But I didn't say that. Instead, I bought parenting books on Amazon and joined online support groups for guardian siblings. I scheduled therapy appointments that Chloe refused to attend. I transferred her to the high school in my district and met with counselors to explain our situation. And through it all, I kept working my full-time job, picking up extra projects whenever possible because suddenly I was responsible for not just my bills but hers too. New clothes, school supplies, doctor visits, phone plan, the expenses never stopped. My savings account, which had been steadily growing toward a down payment on a house someday, started shrinking instead. Things got a little better during her junior year. The constant fighting eased up. She started actually coming home for dinner sometimes, even helping cook occasionally. We'd watch reruns of The Office together, and sometimes I'd catch her laughing, really laughing, which felt like winning the lottery after so many months of gloom. "I'm thinking about college," she mentioned one night while we were loading the dishwasher. "But I know it's expensive, so maybe community college first. Apply wherever you want," I told her without hesitation. "We'll figure it out." And we did. I refinanced my car, picked up freelance work on weekends, and started a separate account specifically for her education. When acceptance letters started rolling in, I told her to choose based on programs, not price tags. When she set her heart on State University with its beautiful campus and top-rated psychology program, I nodded and said we'd make it work. Move-in day came, and I helped carry storage bins and Target bedding into her freshman dorm, met her roommate, assembled a desk lamp, gave her an emergency credit card for absolute necessities only, and drove home to my suddenly very quiet apartment, crying behind my Ray-Bans the whole way. For 4 years, I sent care packages during finals week, answered panicked calls about papers and professor drama, listened to stories about new friends and potential majors and that cute guy from her psych class. Every semester, I wrote checks that made me wince but never complained. This was what our parents would have wanted, for her to have a normal college experience, unconstrained by their absence. I even managed to attend most of her softball games, cheering from the bleachers with other families, pretending it didn't sting when teammates' parents would ask which player was mine, and I'd have to explain our situation for the 100th time. By senior year, I was so proud of her I could burst. She'd maintained good grades, made lasting friendships, secured an internship that might lead to a job. When graduation day arrived, I took the day off work, bought a new dress at Macy's, and arrived early to get a good seat. After the ceremony, I navigated through crowds of grads in identical caps and gowns, finally spotting her with a group of friends near the science building. I hung back, not wanting to interrupt their moment, planning to surprise her with the graduation gift in my purse, a pair of pearl earrings that had belonged to our mom. That's when I heard it. "God, I can't wait to finally have my own place," Chloe was saying to her friends, rolling her eyes dramatically. "These past 4 years have been amazing, but before college, I had to live with my tyrant sister who controlled my every move. It was like living in a prison." Her friends laughed sympathetically while I stood frozen, clutching my purse, feeling like someone had punched me in the stomach. "She was so obsessed with my grades and who I was hanging out with," Chloe continued, completely unaware I was within earshot. "Always checking up on me, making me text her my location. Total helicopter parent vibes. I basically had no social life in high school because of her. I couldn't listen to another word. I turned and walked away, my new heels clicking on the pavement, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall. By the time I reached my car, my sadness had hardened into something else entirely. A tyrant? A prison? Was that really how she saw the last 6 years? The sacrifice vacations, the second job I took to cover her study abroad semester, the nights I stayed up helping her apply for scholarships, all of that added up to tyranny in her mind. I sat in my car, air conditioning blasting against my face, and made a decision I never thought I'd make. Update, y'all won't believe what I did next, but I swear it felt right in the moment. After hearing my sister trash talk me to her friends, something just snapped inside. Have you ever had that experience where years of built-up resentment suddenly crystallize into perfect clarity? I drove home and made one very significant phone call that would change everything. But here's what keeps me up at night. Was I teaching her a valuable lesson, or was I about to destroy our relationship forever? That evening, I logged into my banking app and canceled the payment for her first semester of graduate school, a program she'd been accepted to with my encouragement and financial backing. Then I called the university's financial aid office and withdrew my letter of financial support. 6 figures of education, gone with a few clicks and a phone call. I was sitting at my kitchen table, numbly scrolling through Netflix options I couldn't focus on, when my doorbell started ringing frantically. Then came the pounding on the door and Chloe's voice, high and panicked. When I opened the door, she burst in, still wearing her graduation dress, makeup smudged. "The bursar's office just called me," she practically screamed. "They said my grad school payment was canceled and my enrollment is on hold. What happened? Did your card get declined or something?" I looked at her, really looked at her. The entitled expression, the automatic assumption that I would fix this, that my money would continue to flow her way despite how she truly felt about me. "No," I said, my voice steady in a way I didn't feel. "The payment wasn't declined. I canceled it." She stared at me, confusion replacing anger. "What? Why would you do that?" "I heard you today," I said simply. "At graduation, talking to your friends about what a tyrant I am, how I controlled your every move, how living with me was like prison." Her face went white, then red. "You were eavesdropping on my private conversation?" "Private? You were standing in the middle of campus? And that's really your takeaway here? Not that you completely mischaracterized everything I've done for you since Mom and Dad died?" She switched tactics then, tears filling her eyes. "I was just joking around with friends. You know how people exaggerate for effect. I didn't mean it like that." "Sure sounded like you meant it," I replied, crossing my arms. "But hey, good news. The tyrant has decided to set you free. Now you can do whatever you want without my control or my money." Her mouth opened and closed. "But how will I go to grad school? We already planned everything." "No, I planned everything and paid for everything, but that's not my responsibility anymore." "You can't be serious," she whispered. "You're really cutting me off over one stupid comment?" "Freedom always has a price, Chloe. You wanted independence from my tyranny. Congratulations, you've got it." I showed her to the door despite her protests and tears. As it closed behind her, I leaned against it, questioning if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. But the hurt was too raw, the betrayal too fresh. 6 years of sacrifice dismissed as control and tyranny. Some things you just can't unhear. The next few days were a barrage of texts, calls, and even a surprise visit from one of her friends trying to mediate. I stayed firm, though each tearful voicemail tested my resolve. This wasn't about punishment. It was about consequences. About recognizing that relationships, even family ones, require mutual respect and gratitude. For the first time since our parents died, I took a vacation. Just packed my North Face backpack, booked a cabin in the mountains, and spent a week hiking trails and reading books by the fireplace. No emails, no crisis management, no emotionally draining conversations, just me, some trail mix, and the occasional deer sighting. It was glorious. When I returned, there was a letter in my mailbox. Not a text or email, but an actual handwritten letter on paper from Chloe. I almost didn't open it, afraid it would be more manipulation or guilt-tripping. But curiosity won out. "I'm sorry," it began. "Not just for what I said at graduation, but for taking you for granted all these years. I never properly thanked you for stepping up when our parents died, for putting your life on hold to raise me, for working extra hours to pay for my education. I was spoiled and entitled and completely ungrateful." She went on to explain that she'd moved in with friends temporarily while looking for work, that she was exploring loan options for grad school, but realizing how expensive education actually was without my support. The letter ended with a request to meet for coffee, her treat. I agreed, more out of curiosity than forgiveness. We met at a Starbucks downtown, and I hardly recognized the person sitting across from me. Gone were the designer clothes and perfectly styled hair. Instead, she wore jeans and a plain t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. "I got a job," she told me without preamble. 2, actually, waitressing at Applebee's mornings and working retail at Old Navy evenings. It's not exactly using my psychology degree, but it's paying rent. I nodded, unsure what to say. "I found a room in a house with 3 other girls," she continued. "It's tiny and the bathroom situation is a nightmare, but it's all I can afford right now." She fidgeted with her coffee cup. "I had no idea how expensive real life is. How did you manage it all these years, especially with me as an added expense?" "I just did what needed doing," I said, the first crack appearing in my emotional armor. "That's what family does." No, she shook her head firmly. That's what you did. Most people wouldn't have sacrificed what you did. I never appreciated it until now. Our conversation lasted hours, moving from coffee to lunch at the diner next door. For the first time, she asked detailed questions about the years after our parents died, the financial struggles, the career opportunities I'd passed up to stay in the same city, the dating relationships that had fizzled because I was too busy being her guardian. I always just assumed you were fine, she admitted. You never complained, so I thought everything was easy for you. Nothing about it was easy, I told her honestly. But you were worth it. At least I thought you were until I heard how you really felt. I didn't mean any of that, she said, eyes downcast. I was showing off for friends, trying to seem independent and cool. The truth is, without you, I would have been lost. I still am, kind of. Update. Bruise. It's getting real now. After our coffee meetup, my sister and I started this weird dance of trying to repair things while still keeping our distance. She's struggling big time with her 2 jobs and crappy living situation. Yesterday, she texted me a pic of the mold in their shower that would make your Taco Bell hangover seem pleasant by comparison. Part of me thinks she's learning valuable life lessons, but another part feels like her big sister again, wanting to rescue her. How long do you let someone you love struggle before stepping in? And if I do help her again, am I just enabling the same entitled behavior? 3 months passed. Chloe and I established a cautious new relationship. Weekly dinners where we'd split the check, occasional texts checking in. She never directly asked for money, though sometimes she'd mention offhand challenges. A car, repair she couldn't afford, the rising cost of her prescription meds, how she was living on ramen and peanut butter to save for grad school application fees. I didn't budge. This wasn't about being cruel. It was about her finally understanding the value of financial independence, the weight of responsibility. Things I'd learned at 24, things she was only now grappling with at 22. One evening, she invited me to her apartment for dinner, the first time she'd done so. The place was exactly as she'd described, tiny, with mismatched furniture clearly sourced from various thrift stores and Facebook Marketplace finds. But it was clean, and she'd made a genuine effort with dinner, a simple pasta dish that wasn't half bad. I made Dean's List every semester because of you, she said suddenly, as we washed dishes together afterward, her hands soapy in the tiny sink. Not just because you paid the tuition, but because I knew how hard you worked. I didn't want to waste the opportunity you gave me. I'm glad, I said, surprised by the admission. My roommate Jen is drowning in student loans, she continued. Like 6 figures worth. Her parents couldn't help at all. When I told her my sister paid for everything, she said I won the sibling lottery. She glanced at me sideways. She's right. Even when I thought you were controlling me, you were actually protecting me from all— She gestured around the cramped apartment. This. That night driving home, I thought about what she'd said, about how perspective changes everything, how her entitled complaints at graduation came from someone who had no concept of true struggle, while her appreciation now came from someone beginning to understand the real world. The next day, I made a decision. I called Chloe and asked if she could meet me for dinner that weekend. When she arrived at the restaurant, on time, which was new for her, I handed her an envelope. She opened it cautiously, then stared at the contents. A check, but not for the full amount of grad school tuition. About half. I don't understand, she said, looking up at me with confusion. It's a match, I explained. Whatever you save toward grad school, I'll match it. Up to this amount each semester. You work, you save, you maintain at least a 3.5 GPA, and I'll partner with you. Not carry you. Partner with you. Her eyes filled with tears. Why would you do this after how I treated you? Because you're my sister. And because you're finally getting it. That success isn't handed to you. That family support isn't an entitlement. It's a gift that should be appreciated. She nodded, carefully putting the check back in the envelope. I've already saved almost $3,000, she said proudly, working doubles on weekends and selling some of my designer stuff online. That's a solid start, I said, impressed despite myself. 6 months after graduation, Chloe enrolled in grad school part-time while continuing to work. She stayed in the apartment with roommates, making her own way, but with my support as a safety net rather than a free ride. Our relationship shifted to something more equal. Still sisters, but now more like friends, too. Sometimes when we're hanging out watching trash TV with takeout from Chipotle, she'll randomly say thank you. Not for anything specific, just in general. And I know she finally gets it. Last week, she stopped by unexpectedly with a small gift bag. What's this for? I asked, pulling out a tissue-wrapped package. Open it, she urged. Inside was a framed photo of our parents, one I'd never seen before. They were young, probably around the ages Chloe and I are now, laughing at something off camera. I found it in one of the boxes from their house, she explained. The ones you stored all these years that I never bothered to look through before. They would be so proud of you, of how you took care of me even when I was the worst. I tried to speak but couldn't past the lump in my throat. You weren't a tyrant, she continued softly. You were exactly what I needed when my world fell apart, and I'm sorry it took losing your support to realize that. I set the frame on my mantle, next to the pearl earrings I still hadn't given her, maybe for her graduation from grad school, I thought, when she's truly earned them. Sometimes people really do need to experience the cost of words like control and freedom to understand their true meaning, and sometimes even the most entitled siblings can grow up with the right push toward reality. Update. It's been over a year now since graduation day, and man, what a difference. My sister is crushing it in grad school while still working part-time at that Applebee's. Yesterday, she called me freaking out because she got selected for this prestigious research position that could lead to a serious job after graduation. We celebrated with cheap beer and nachos at that dive bar near campus. Her choice, not mine. Remember how I mentioned those pearl earrings that were our mom's? Still haven't given them to her yet, but I'm thinking her grad school graduation might be the perfect time. The real question keeping me up at night, did I do the right thing by cutting her off, or did we just get lucky that it worked out? Anyone else had to use tough love on family and live to tell about it?